Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first webinar of the year of Simpson. The title of this webinar is Why Stop Markup and Excel Pricing and Start Using Smart Pricing Strategies. The coming 45 minutes, we are completely live again on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we're looking forward to make this an interactive session to educate you and learn you the latest lessons about applying a pricing engine into your pricing process. Um, as you probably already know, today we're going to talk about the pricing engine. 9 out of 10 companies is still using spreadsheets and Excels to manage their pricing. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have a certain amount of products in your assortment, for example, at least thousands, and have hundreds of customers, then using spreadsheets becomes a little bit more challenging to maintain and optimize your prices. So this webinar is for you if you recognize yourself in this description. And the speakers today are probably already familiar for you, for those who attended previous webinars. My name is Arjen Oosthoek, co-founder of Simpson, and my colleague Vincent Geling, director of Simpson, will also speak during this webinar. We start with a quote for this webinar. We start with the agenda of this webinar. First, I'm going to tell you about why you could miss potential, especially growth potential, with the traditional pricing methods. Vincent will tell you about how to transform your Excel into a pricing engine. What's the process there? And he will also tell you about 3 concepts to increase the margin with a pricing engine. And I will tell you a little bit more about the business case, about the benefits, and in the end of this webinar, we have a Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can use the LinkedIn chat, and the questions will pop up in the screen. So by the end of this webinar, we will address them. Next quote. Great. We start this webinar with a quote. The question we often get from customers, but also potential customers, is how often or how frequently do you need to change the prices? And this is the answer we can give. It's a familiar quote. You should be updating your pricing as often as the market requires and allows. So there's no general rule of thumb to answer this question. How frequently you need to change the price. It's completely dependent on the market circumstances, but also about your internal processes. For example, for a B2B company, you can do this once a month or once a quarter. For a B2C company, you could do this daily or multiple times a day. To give you a little bit more information where these market circumstances come from, I will show the next slide. And this gives you an overview of the value chain, where you see on the beginning of the value chain, of course, the manufacturers, the companies that produce goods and products. And later in the chain, you have distributors, wholesale customers, wholesalers, and retailers. And of course, in the end, you have the end consumers, who could be either B2B or consumers, B2C. But when it comes to pricing, we see differences in a couple of dimensions. You see them on the right side. First of all, it's the price changes. You see a difference in the number of price changes in the beginning compared to the end. So in the manufacturing, factorers have less frequent price changes because there are long-term contracts. And later in the value chain, you see that more price changes could happen because there's more drivers you need to take into account. There's more competition, but also the availability of products could be a factor, or the customer behavior. You also see a difference in the dimension of transaction value. In manufacturer, you could have a larger transaction value, and smaller, of course, in later in the chain at retail or e-commerce side. And also the number of customers and their relation is different. In retail, you could potentially have thousands of customers which you don't know by person. And in manufacturing side, you could also have thousands of customers, but you often know them by person. You know more of the buyer. There is already a certain relation. Also, the stakeholders could differ. So we see that in manufacturing side, for example, sales is a big stakeholder in deciding what's an optimal discount. And later in the value chain, you see that the stakeholder, for example, category management or marketing or e-commerce is involved. Three other dimensions. We have the pricing strategy that could be different. Manufacturing, you start at the cost. So you have a very good process of knowing what is a good cost price based on the raw material, maybe also R&D costs and labor costs. Later in the value chain, you could differ with different pricing strategies because the market becomes more transparent. So you could have a competitor pricing, or a dynamic pricing can be applied based upon the factors that are relevant in this particular market. The last one is the level of automation and the price communication. Level of automation also differs. We see in retail and e-commerce that prices are often more automated because there's a very structured price process. And more earlier in the value chain, it could be that there's more flexibility in deciding what's an optimal discount. And price communication, of course, you see in the retail and e-commerce, that's more transparency. Competitor prices are easier to get. And in B2B manufacturing distribution, this is often hidden behind the login. So there are big differences why you could change your prices more often than the others. The bottom line in this is that in all parts of the value chain, a price engine could add value. And this is where we're going to talk about today. Within Simpson, and our approach is that we also take a look where is the data intensive task and where is the manual repetitive task in the price process. And this could be different per type of company. Yes, we can go to the next slide. When it comes to Excel, we still see that 9 out of 10 companies is using Excel. And as already said in the introduction, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you hit a certain limit in customers and products in your assortment, Excel is limited. And also the gut feeling, of course, is limited. This is also the reason why we started as a company. We saw that using Excel and the manual process is a kind of a static learning process. But by introducing a system, by introducing a price engine, you could introduce multiple learning loops. So next to that, the price expert learns from what is a good price. You also introduce a learning loop in the organization where multiple stakeholders can learn from what is a good price. That's the organizational learning. And when you introduce machine learning, you have a next learning loop where machine learning helps you in recommending what is a good price. That being said, still a lot of companies are using Excel. So we see in the next slide the shortcomings of Excel. I won't address them all, but I would highlight two different limitations. One of them is the scalability challenge. We see nowadays that a lot of companies want to scale, and they want to have more products in their assortment. They want to enter new markets, or add a new channel or marketplace. Just copy pasting your Excel and duplicating your current pricing process or strategy for the new product, for the new markets, or for the new customers, could not always be the most effective process, because you have different customer behavior, you have different product attributes. Every dimension could need a new pricing process, and this is hard to adapt that into Excel. Another shortcoming is the human error sensitivity. I can best explain that by showing you the next slide. In the slide you see a picture of Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan. And there is an anecdote from JP Morgan where one of the JP Morgan traders made a big mistake in one of the Excels. Instead of using a sum, they used an average. And it was in the end an error of 6 billion in the value at risk model. So in the end, this was a very, very high cost of making a human error. And there was by JP Morgan a whole report written how this could be wrong. How can this make 6 billion mistake? And their conclusion was that the trader was under pressure. So having such a critical process driven by manual tasks is very dangerous in your company. And based upon our experience, the pricing process is also a very critical process. So relying purely on Excels and human task could be a risk for your company. That's the introduction. That's the first chapter. I would like to give the floor to my colleague Vincent for the next topic.
He was still muted. Let's move to the second topic, and that's transforming your Excel pricing to a pricing engine. So what we see within organization is that we need to move the organization from one position, of course, to the other. And what are the main drives then for that transformation, and what are the benefits that we get from that? So the first one, of course, is that we see within organizations that when it comes down to pricing decisions and there is not enough data to make a decision, that it is mostly driven on gut feeling and feelings that people have within the pricing process in the organization. And this leads also to discussions that resonate to feelings, and that also makes sure that there's a lot of disagreement in the team when it comes down to pricing. When you are able to move the gut feeling pricing decisions towards more data-driven and supported by machine learning or even AI decisions, it can help an organization to make more decisions and do more quickly, but also being able to install the learning loops that come out of those decisions, because it's measurable why these decisions are made. And that really helps a organization to move from the old situation towards the new situation. Beside that, what we see is that within Excel, we often see a cost-based plus strategy. Of course, we can have discounts, rebates, stuff like that going on in the B2B, or maybe in the B2C that they have a promotion that is computed in Excel. But what we try to achieve in the new way of pricing is that one product can have multiple price strategies depending on the data maturity of the product. So a product that has, for instance, a lot of transactions, we can learn from a price elasticity perspective, for instance, what the ideal price position is. But if it's more a commodity product that has a high velocity of sales, we can make a combination, for instance, to learn from the competitive field, but also to learn from the elasticity models that run behind that same product. So taking into consideration multiple price strategies that are depending on the data maturity of that specific product or products that you have within the organization, we are able to move organizations from a single price strategy to multiple pricing strategies on one product. Next to that, of course, as Arjen already addressed, if we look at the value chain, we see the movement of prices differ depending on where your organization is in that value chain. So sometimes slow movements are, of course, required, or is just how the market operates. But if you have the possibility to become more dynamic or more agile, or if, as we look in the past, like what we are experiencing now and what we have experienced during COVID-19, is that when the market becomes more volatile, it's not always a decision if you want to move your price, yes or no. It's mandatory because there's so much volatility in the market that you need to change those prices. And I like the anecdote that Arjen just brought up, is that when you are forced to do multiple price changes, and that these circumstances are pushed into your organization, and your strategy and your execution is based on Excel, then the probability that an error occurs in that specific process or in that situation, that of course becomes higher. The following step is, of course, also to move from manual reports to more automatic smart insights. So once you have a pricing engine in place and you don't use your Excel learnings where you maybe can digest transactions afterwards, so maybe you want to learn more on the moment. So if you want to do that, then that is where a pricing engine can make the difference. So it can help you to generate these smart insights. When do we steer? When do we identify the margin leakage that is going on? So that is something that can be learned, that can be achieved when you install the pricing engine. The next one is, of course, static learning versus hyperlearning. So what do we do, and are humans as capable as a pricing engine to digest all the data and come up with the learnings and then reuse that in the next pricing round that we are going to execute? And this is, of course, a question that you can always ask yourself. Of course, we have capabilities together with Excel, but in general, as an assumption, what we know from scientific research is that we as humans can only work with some 7 numbers at the same time. If you look at a machine and we do multiple dimensions for a machine, that can be, of course, to a certain magnitude more than 7 what we can do as a human. So that is also good to take into account to become more a hyper-learning organization, making use of a combination of man and advanced machines or technologies that are already available. And the last one, of course, is what we see in Excel organization is that we see that there's sometimes a really strong focus on what is currently happening within the organization. Instead of having rest in the organization, automating 95%, for instance, of the pricing process, what enables the team to free up time and focus on the strategy that needs to be deployed in the future, we see that there is too much focus on the current price process and controlling that everything is going in the right way. So this is also a nice example how the pricing engine can help you transform from a focus on the current state of the situation towards more of future focused strategy, and that you have time to execute that. And then you can ask yourself the question, how much value is a pricing engine actually going to deliver to my organization? And this is an exercise that you can do yourself as well, even if you have a telephone by hand. So what we can do is look at your current catalog. So how many products or services are you selling into the market, and multiply that by the number of pricing dimensions that you are serving. So a pricing dimension can be that you sell your inventory in the Netherlands, in Germany, in the USA, and maybe in Sweden. So then you have, for instance, 4 different countries, 4 different pricing dimensions where you want to fit your prices in that specific market. It becomes even more complex if you have multiple price channels where you have a justification to have a different price on a product per channel, because the customer that is buying in that specific channel is presenting a different behavior than the clients in the other channels. If we look at B2B, we often already see is that they have, of course, customer segments, meaning that in each segment, they address different price lists to serve that segment best. And the other thing is that we also see in B2B is that they work with key accounts. So how do we set the prices then on the key accounts? And these are all pricing dimensions that you need to take into account. So the number of products times the number of dimensions that you are managing is the total number of price points that you have in the markets. And by making that sum, that acquisition that I just mentioned, is now you can identify how much prices you need to manage with your pricing organization. And depending, of course, how big that number is, you can ask the question, do we have currently the capabilities to execute all these price points in a proper way, in a velocity that is accepted by my market, to achieve the best results on margin and revenue level that we have set as a KPI for our organization. So the frequency of the price change and the time investment that you have to make, so consider that exercise really helps you to determine how much value a pricing engine can deliver. And I would say that in most companies, that is already something that can come in quite quickly. If we look at the typical organization, and I would say this addresses more to the B2B, we see that once prices are set, we have multiple layers within our organization how we can work with prices. And you want to have a certain level of governance, of course, within your organization, how we deploy prices and how we control them. So a pricing engine is able to first set up that structure within your organization. So for instance, on headquarter levels, we decide on like a minimum required price, minimum margin required price, and for instance, a list price that is set by the organization, what is communicated to the next level. And on the second level, we have commercial terms. So if there's a list price, what is the playing room that a person that is a specialist in that specific region or has like insights on the transactions or whatsoever, what is the playing room that he gets or she gets to set the commercial terms around products that are sold in the market or across product groups? And that range is then communicated to the latest or the layer that is executing the sales, of course, towards the consumers that are facing the organization. And there we really decide on what that specific discount or specific price setting then should be. And by having that in a pricing solution, we enable ourselves to set boundaries in how for our organization, based on the governance that we have laid out, can operate. And it really strongly identifies when we hit escalation level, meaning that if there is a price corridor and a person within your organization wants to move beyond the lowest level of the corridor, it means that it is escalation zone and that we need to ask approval. With a pricing engine, you enable yourself to make those setups in a pricing engine, and also enables your organization to make the right decisions at the right moment and have only the discussions that really matter in terms of price setting and price execution. And by having that system in place, and pricing engine can help you to digest and to set up that structure more easily. Yeah, because the pricing engine, and I like this picture in terms of, let's say, the onion rings, how that comes about. Because the pricing engine in the basic is, of course, just to say this such a way, the rule-based pricing engine, right? So we consider, for instance, all the costs within an organization, and we have a minimum margin requirement, or we want to process some other elements in the price that are for us in the basics of the rule engine. And that is actually the first step of the fundament that you want to have in place and automated so that you can work with the right numbers and that we use the right data to make the right decisions. But that enables you also to start working with the more dynamic rules. And more dynamic rules can be that you want to yield on certain factors. So for instance, yielding on your inventory, or yielding on certain market conditions that you see coming, or that you can digest in your strategies. On top of it, we also can set minimum margin threshold or upper margin threshold, or we can say, like, depending on the precision of the product, if it's like a commodity or a non-commodity product, how we want to yield the margin on those products. So it really also helps from the static rule-based or more general rule-based pricing engine to become more dynamic and more agile in our prices. And that, of course, enables us in the next dimension to start utilizing external data sources. And external data sources, as what Arjen already mentioned, can be, for instance, competitor data. What we see when transparency is quite high, we can use that to really compare prices one-on-one. But can also be in the B2B environment, right? So we don't have to know the specific prices, but we can identify trends. So is the price of lumber going down, or is the price in generally going up? So identifying trends across all the information that is available justifies for a organization to do something with the prices according to the market circumstances that we have identified. On top of it, there's, of course, market information. If certain events are going on that are really specific to that market that you want to digest in your strategies and your price setting. And finally, of course, we have the economical cycles. So as what you probably have noticed, that we have the boom and bust cycles, we have debt cycles, we have all types of cycles that are going on within the economy. And what we want to do is to make sure that we set the data that we analyze to fill up models, or to start working with, that they correspond with the current cycle that we are doing and executing our sales in. And that leads then up to the final step where machine learning and eventually also AI models can come in, where we can make specific machine learning models that digest all types of price drivers to eventually help you to compute the ideal price. But all the structures that we have mentioned before are helping to set the boundaries in where this machine learning model can do its execution. And that really helps to gain the governance across your product and price settings, but still do it within the limits of your organization and the goals that you have set as a business. Yeah, because where does this complexity actually come in? Because what we normally see is that there are, of course, small organizations that are interested in the pricing engine, but larger organizations, of course, also, although we often see that they have a certain solution in place already. But what you see, of course, is that the complexity increases not only by the size of the organization, so how big the organization becomes, how more complex the cost structure can be, or the spends that are going on within the business. And on top of it, the number of variables that you want to take into account to compute the ideal price setting of your products also increases, of course, with the access to the data that you gain as a business. So that in the first initial step, that can be cost, and you can start making use of competitor data. Then you can make use of market conditions, etc. So you see that how more dimensions come to the game, how more the complexity of a pricing eventually will rise, and how more guidance we and simulations we would need to set the right price point in the market. So having said that, so now we know more or less where the complexity comes from and how we transform, and what is the transformation from an Excel and more static way of pricing to a more automated way of pricing. And that doesn't have to be by definition already super dynamic, but it helps you to go in that direction. And how dynamic it eventually will become, that depends of course on your business characteristics. But just to mention 3 concepts that we can quite easily implement once you have the price engine up and running to increase your margin position and profitability of the organization. Because eventually, of course, if you start working with a pricing solution, there should always be a positive return on investment to justify, of course, the decisions that we make. So let's go to the first concept that can be applied. So as what he said is, if we look at Excel, it's hard to manage multiple dimensions in Excel, and the error sensitivity, of course, increases with that. What we see in customer segmentation, once we are able to do it, is that we can do in B2B, of course, segmentation based on the customer groups that we have and the key accounts that we have, and then determine based on, for instance, this model where we talk about demographics, geographics, of psychological aspects or behavioral aspects, that we can take that into account to plot the behavior and the specific characteristics of the clients that we are dealing with, building a certain model that address the right client with the right product set that we want to sell in that specific group. And this really helps the segmentation of the customers to, of course, have different margins on different levels to really utilize and capture the true value that you can get out of your products. If we look more in the B2C channels, where we not by definition work with customer segmentation and key accounts, what we see there is often multiple channels, right? So if we take, for instance, the Netherlands, we have bol.com, we have Coolblue, we have Google Shopping, Amazon. If you are in Germany, we see Kaufland and Otto. And so in each country, there are different marketplaces where trade is going on. And on these bigger trading platforms, we see that sometimes there's a justification to work different prices on different platforms. Because that is based on the transactional analysis that we can do, that there is a justification to do so. And this also helps to have different customer groups, only they are now plotted in a different sales channel to discriminate or to have different prices on those platforms to eventually yield more, of course, on your margin perspective. And this is one of the solutions that you can apply once you have that engine in place, because it's easy to maintain all these different dimensions and then set prices on the specific engines and groups that you have as an organization and where you want to develop a price list for. So just as an example, next to the customer segmentation, we can do product segmentation. So product segmentation knows many models, as customer segmentation does as well. For an example, we took for this webinar the segmentation of your products. If you have your whole catalog, to look into your catalog and see, all right, which of my products are actually commodities and which of my products are non-commodities, right? And then we can identify within commodity products or fast-moving products and or slow-moving products. And we can, of course, identify in our non-commodity products which are our fast-moving non-commodities and which are our slow-moving non-commodities. And finally, of course, we have the unique situation that we are maybe introducing new products into new markets, or maybe, new products into existing markets, but the situation is quite unfamiliar in that sense. So if we then look at the automation perspective that you can achieve with the price engine, if we start making use of commodity and commodity products that are slow movers. So what do we know from this perspective? Commodity products means that there are multiple sellers in the market selling the same product as I'm selling. So what is available for me is market knowledge and understanding how all my competition is selling the same product as I am and what price are they actually asking for it. And because it's a slow mover, it means on transactional level, it's hard for me to identify which justification I can find to move my prices maybe a bit higher than competition or maybe a bit lower, and at which times that is a possibility to do so, or in which seasons, or in which part of the seasonality flow. So what we can make use of here, if we start automating commodity products that are slow movers, we can start making use of competitive pricing, and then maybe make use of a sensitivity model that is able to pull in more data points than only price and demand and volume to eventually optimize the price and how we should place it. One that's, of course, more easy to understand is the commodity fast movers. So here we for sure want to know what our competition is doing, but we also have enough transactional data to understand if we can yield more on the margin that we have running within our on that specific product. So here we can make use in the automation of competitive pricing in combination with elasticity and see if we can do the A/B testing to find out if we find justification to move prices a little bit up higher or maybe a little bit lower. The non-commodity slow move is of course a specific situation where we have the uniqueness that it is a product that is not sold by other competitors in the markets, or only a few, or that's really limited in that sense. And the other challenge that we have is that the transactional data is quite low. In this specific case, what we can do is develop the price sensitivity model. And if we have the price sensitivity model, we can still pull in different data levels and different data drivers and price drivers to eventually identify how we need to move the price. So automation here is still to a certain extent for sure possible. And the other one is the non-commodity fast movers. So here, of course, no competition, a lot of transactional data. We can utilize elasticity models here. And the final one is where we see that manual work is required, because we can look at the quadrant of automation, and where we want to automate for sure is if we have familiar tasks with a high data density. And if we are entering new markets with new products, then it is like an unfamiliar task and a low data density, meaning that we really need a part of the manual work of a human, where we need the expertise of a domain expert to start identifying how we can work the markets and understand and pioneer the ideal price point, of course, for our product that we are introducing here. Then we move to the final concept that I can tell you about, and that is all about key value items. So we can do once we have the pricing engine up and running, we see, of course, all the transactions that are going on. And within the transactions, we can also do the order analysis, or we can do the basket analysis if we talk B2C. In the most common baskets that we identify, we can start identifying what are our key value items. So the products that are bought very often, that pull in a lot of traffic and generate, of course, sales. So what we can do on a key value item is make sure that we price that specific key value item sharp in the market. So meaning that we are losing out on the margin potential that we probably could have gotten on that specific item. Although what we see, because we have automated this process and we can learn from our insight, is that the substitutes that are sold with this specific key value item can be used to increase margins a bit. And so we can make sure that the margin that we missed out upon on the key value item are compensated by the substitutes that we sell into the market, meaning that we eventually achieve a higher share of wallet of the client that is purchasing these products with us. And this is where, what we said earlier, where customer segmentation becomes really important, because per customer group, of course, and per segmentation, this key value item strategy can be completely different. Yes, and then we move already to the last concept that we can deploy here, and that is the price maturity journey that you can do as an organization. So what we see with organizations that are active in 0.1 or in 1.0 pricing, it means that they are often focused on driving the volume within their organization. So how do we set up prices in such a way that we can increase volume? The next step that we want to achieve is, once you have done the volume pricing situation, we want to move to transactional control. And within transactional control, we can learn how transactions are, of course, executed in a specific channel, on a specific customer group, etc. And based on that data, we can then make our decisions how we want to move prices, and it becomes more also data-driven and data-based. The next step is that we move to full value capturing, meaning that we are not pricing as a project, but that it really becomes a process within the organization. So we have the building blocks in place, and we know which lines are walked by a product or by a group or whatsoever to eventually optimize prices. And the final step is that we can do is that we implement algorithmic pricing, right? So that we have algorithms in place that can learn from each pricing cycle, put that data back into the engine again to learn from that data, and then reprice the products accordingly to all the conditions that we have digested, and then plot the ideal price in that specific channel or customer group or product group or specific product, because we are able to digest so many different data points that we are able to understand how the market behaves and how we can best adapt to that specific market situation. Then I will give the floor back to Arjen, who will tell you a bit more about the benefits of the pricing engine. And yes, Arjen.
Yes, thank you, Vincent. For the topic today, we will give you an overview about the benefits and the business case, because we can imagine you have a question. Okay, what does it bring to me? So we have two dimensions of this business case. First, the financial, and then the organizational business case. And the financial business case could of course be different per size of the company. But the most important element of the financial business case is the margin improvement. And it's realistic for manufacturing companies to calculate with a margin improvement between 1 and 2% for manufacturing companies. And you see for a little bit later in the value chain for wholesale and e-commerce, margin improvement between 2 and 5% is realistic. So if you calculate what's your current margin, and if you add 1% on top of that margin, you can calculate what's the result for you. In terms of the organizational business case, you were going to more the soft side of the business case. One of the important elements is that you improve your price accuracy and consistency. So if you have organized your pricing in such a way that's automated and the prices are determined by a certain logic, you see that the pricing accuracy will increase, and of course also we will consistent across every channel and region. You can include more factors. So as Vincent already showed you, you can make use of demand, competition, customer behavior, depending on the customer group or product group you apply. You can automate your pricing decisions to reduce human error and save time, enhance price communications with your customers and building trust. And another one, securing all knowledge in a system. That's also quite important point because we often see that before using a pricing engine, there's one person working in pricing with his Excels. So all the knowledge he has is or in his head or in his Excel. And if you want to scale as a company, you need to secure all the knowledge into a system. So that's also an important business case for the organization. The Omnibus, compliant with Omnibus Directive, that's a kind of a new business case. It's a new regulation from the European Union that you need to be compliant. So a lot of companies in e-commerce need to be compliant according to Omnibus. In other words, simple words, it is that you have to keep your prices transparent for at least 30 days. So if you do markdowns with promotions, for example, with Valentine's Day or Black Friday, you need to communicate these prices as well. So that's a new regulation. And of course, if you have a price engine, the database will store the historical prices. So we are completely compliant with that. So this is the first insight of the business case. The numbers, of course, can be specific to your company. So that's how you can fill in the blanks. We have 8 more minutes for questions. So this is where the fun part starts. I see a couple of questions coming in the chat. Francesco, do you see big difference in key value item concepts in B2B versus B2C? It's still applicable in B2B. Thank you for your question, Francesco. Vincent, would you like to start?
Sure. Of course, the educated answer here is depends. I would say if you look at the organizations that have longer term contracts, you see that the value drivers in those contracts can be different in terms if you look at the key value item strategy. Although if you look at, for instance, wholesalers that are active in the market, I would say there we see that if you look at the segments that they serve and how the transactions are coming about in their organization, and if we analyze those orders, we see that is for them in terms of value really valuable. If we look at the more retail side of things, of course, this option is applicable as well for sure. If we look in retail towards the promotions that we run, right? So if we have a product that lasts for X period and we know what the duration of the period is, and we have a certain segment that buys in that specific time period, to reactivate them with a specific promo of anything that can happen in that sense, that will really activate, of course, the buying behavior. And as said, if we move further down the line, more to the manufacturers, etc., we see that different value drivers start to occur. And then key value item doesn't really have to be that big of an influence. But yeah, as said, so it depends on case by case, but the answer is not black and white in that sense.
Yeah. And as an addition to that, I think you see also a different use case in key value items. In B2C, it's often indeed used for promotions. In B2B, it's often used in sales, because then you know, okay, which item is our customer really sensitive for the price. So then we have to really make an attractive price or an attractive discount to keep the customer based upon this key value item. So there are differences, especially in the application and also in the approach. And our approach is also that we have a kind of a hyperlearning approach. So if we have defined a key value item, with B2B, we often validate it with sales, and B2C, you often validate it with category management or promotion management. Interesting question, Francesco. Thanks for asking. How well, thank you, Emla. How well does the price engine integrate with popular e-commerce platforms? Vincent, I think there's also a question for you.
Yes, I think it depends. So normally quite well, of course. Depending if the solution that you make use of, and that is something you need to investigate, is for instance a cloud solution that can fit within what we call nowadays a MAG architecture, what is microservice driven and fully in the cloud. It's API driven, so meaning that you have import and export APIs, and that is kind of to say it really simplistic, is that we can just put down lines from our applications to the application that we want to make use of, where all types of computations are taking place, and there is another line from that application as an export back to your systems or other channels that you have active, where we can quickly push data back and forth. So making use of those APIs, then it is really easy to integrate, of course, with different e-commerce platforms. If it is a more, let's say not MAG architecture developed application, it could be that the development cycle and to deploy it is a little bit more difficult.
Next question is from Sarah Grossauer. Thank you for this question. If our company is already doing a customer segmentation, segment our products in their sensitivity, and is thinking about long tail pricing, how can you help us implement this system into our ERP system? Very good question. I will start and then you can add. A lot of questions come up when you're asking this question, but great that you already segmented your products into price sensitivity. I think long tail pricing, that's a big challenge for a lot of companies, because most of the times you have time to focus on the 20% of the items, and the 80% of the items, the long tail, it's hard to optimize them. However, within Simpson, we can help you with that, with defining first what is a long tail and a slow mover, and then also applying the right pricing strategy or tactic upon it to keep it, to move it from a long tail product more to a fast mover. How can you help implement this system into our ERP system? You can see Simpson as a system where the price process starts where the ERP ends. So it's like a price engine that does all the extra work where the price or the ERP system ends. So it's already explained in this webinar. You can add more drivers and add more optimization to calculate the optimal price. But Vincent, go ahead.
Yeah, what we see in ERP systems is of course that you can set up different dimensions, and that an ERP system helps you to a certain extent to manage and maintain those prices. But what we, and I think that is probably an experience that you have as well, is that once you start to develop like machine learning models or other models, then that is already something that you normally, at least that is our experience with the larger ERP systems, that you need to do these types of execution outside of your ERP system and then bring those numbers back into your ERP system if you want to make that the source where everything goes in and out, right? So as a central point of distribution of the data. And I think if you look at the long tail, and if you're already using sensitivity pricing to also to optimize and maybe reposition your long tail, I think that sensitivity model is always something you can work on. So understanding multiple drivers or other drivers that can also enhance or make that model more comprehensive to work with the long tail. And I think here you see often the combination that if you look at sensitivity pricing, you can look factual to the data, right? To which data sources do I have access, and is that only internal data? Or are we able to also digest external sources? This is where the complexity comes in, right? And then we have, of course, machine analysis, and we have like the gut feeling in the organization. And by taking into account the human perspective and the machine perspective, and then design the weights that should be assigned in that specific sensitivity model, there is where we can make the difference. So it's also, I think, the methodology and the deployment of that sensitivity model, to which extent we really can have an influence on the long tail and price that accordingly to the market circumstances. Yeah, I really like this question. It really hits the essence of where a sensitivity model can make a difference, and how important the methodology is to come to a proper solution that actually works, right? And of course, that is achieved by validation and A/B testing to run that within your organization.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Looking at the time, I think we have still time for one question. Thanks, Hermela, again for this question. How flexible is the price engine in terms of accommodating different business models and pricing strategies? I can start with answering that question. Yeah, without selling Simpson, but I think if you are in the market for looking at a price engine, Simpson is an alternative which is very flexible in applying it into different business model and pricing strategies. If you're selling in B2B or if you're selling in B2C, you can make price lists for one specific customer group or one specific product group, but you can also make it for multiple product groups and multiple customer groups. And even on region levels, channel levels, there are all kind of dimensions where you can produce your price process and price list. So yeah, if we talk on behalf of Simpson, we're looking forward, Hermela, to show you how the price engine is flexible according to your needs. Hope this gives a short answer, but also looking at the time, yeah, we are happy to continue the conversation if you have more questions, or if you would like to get a more in-depth demonstration of how a price engine could work for you. Right now, on behalf of Vincent, I would like to thank you for your attendance. We enjoyed the past 45 minutes. As I already said, if you would like to continue the conversation, please ask. Yeah, we can schedule a demo, or you can reach us on LinkedIn to further continue the conversation about pricing. On 7 March, we have a next webinar about dynamic pricing, so we're also looking forward to that. And for now, we wish you a great day, and looking forward to see you in real life.
Thanks.
Have a great day.